You know that tree, the charter oak? It's one of the most iconic images from the entire state quarter program. The 1999 Connecticut quarter shows its sprawling branches, stretching across the surface of the coin, a symbol of strength, resilience, and the deep roots of American history. Billions of these coins were struck that year, most of them ordinary, but somewhere among them, hidden in the vast sea of silver-gray metal, a few were different. Very different. At first glance, they looked just like the rest. Same design, same weight, same metallic shine, but under the surface something was off. And when collectors finally started to notice, those small differences turned into discoveries worth tens of thousands of dollars. Because some of these 1999 Connecticut quarters, struck by mistake, are now selling for as much as $56,000, even $132,000. The story starts at the very beginning of the state quarter series. 1999 was a huge year for the U.S. Mint. The program had just launched, and the first 5 state designs, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut, were being minted nonstop. The pressure was enormous. Millions of Americans were eager to collect the new coins, and production had to keep up. The mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were working around the clock. But in that rush to meet demand, something unexpected happened. A few of the Connecticut quarters were struck on the wrong metal planchets. Planchets meant for other coins entirely. Some were even struck on experimental blanks being tested for future series. Others showed dramatic off-center strikes or die misalignments. And a handful displayed doubling on the lettering, the date, or even parts of the charter oak itself. These weren't your typical tiny misprints. They were minting errors so rare that only a few have ever surfaced in verified collections. Imagine a day at the mint in 1999. The presses are running at high speed, striking hundreds of coins every minute. The machines are deafening, the air thick with the smell of metal and oil. A worker checks the presses, making sure each blank that feeds through is the right size, the right metal. But somewhere in that process, a single wrong blank slips in. Maybe it was meant for a foreign coin, maybe for a nickel or dime. It doesn't matter, because once the dies strike it, the error is born. And that tiny accident is what transforms an everyday coin into a small fortune. Years later, one of these rare Connecticut errors was discovered in the most ordinary way imaginable. A man in Virginia had been collecting state quarters with his kids. They'd dump spare change on the kitchen table every few weeks, searching through each one. And then one evening, something caught his eye. One coin had a strange color, slightly goldish, not quite like the others. He picked it up. The weight felt different. "That's odd," he said, rolling it across the table. The sound it made wasn't right either, lighter, sharper. He almost tossed it aside. Almost. But something told him to hold on. He did some research, weighed it on a small jewelry scale, and sure enough, it didn't match the standard 5.67 grams. That was the first clue. He sent it off for grading, thinking maybe it was just a curiosity worth a few bucks. Weeks later, the phone rang. The grading service told him, "Sir, you might want to sit down for this." The coin he'd found, a 1999 Connecticut state quarter, was struck on the wrong planchet. It wasn't supposed to exist, and at auction, it sold for over $70,000. Stories like that ripple through the coin collecting world. Overnight, everyone began checking their Connecticut quarters again. Rolls of coins were opened, jars of change poured out. Collectors weighed, magnified, and inspected every surface. And for good reason, because a few more were found. Each one was different. One had partial cladding missing, exposing the copper layer beneath. Another had clear doubling in the word Connecticut. And a few, incredibly, showed a misaligned die strike that caused part of the design to be cut off at the edge. Every one of those coins was a once-in-a-lifetime find. The most valuable examples of the Connecticut quarter error are those with off-metal strikes, coins struck on planchets meant for other denominations. When authenticated, they command staggering prices. One sold for $56,000. Another, a near-perfect specimen in pristine condition, fetched $132,000. That's right, a single quarter worth more than a brand-new luxury car. And the irony? It was worth just 25 cents when it left the mint. To a collector, that kind of story is irresistible. It's not just about the money, It's about the mystery. How could such a thing happen? How does a wrong planchet end up in the press? The answer lies in the complexity of minting itself. The process is designed to be flawless, but it involves so many steps, so many moving parts, that the tiniest oversight can have massive consequences. Planchets are stored in huge bins before they're fed into the presses. If even one wrong blank from another denomination or test batch makes its way into that bin, it can result in a single extraordinary error coin. The machines won't stop. The dies will strike. And before anyone realizes it, the coin is released into circulation. For most people, it's impossible to tell. The differences are subtle. But to the trained eye or the lucky one, they're unmistakable. A faint difference in tone. A slightly thinner rim. The way light reflects differently off the metal. Or that feeling when the coin doesn't sound quite right when it hits the table. These are the clues that separate ordinary change from treasured. If you want to know whether you might have one, there are a few things to check. First, color. The 1999 Connecticut quarter should be the same silvery gray as any modern quarter. But an off-metal error might appear yellowish, bronze-tinted, or darker gray. Second, weight. A digital scale will tell you if it's even slightly off from the standard 5.67 grams. Third, details. Look for doubling in the letters, the date, or parts of the tree branches. Finally, the edge. If the reading, the small ridges, looks uneven or incomplete, that could be another clue. Every time a new error like this is discovered, it reignites excitement among collectors. The State Quarter Series is the most popular coin program in U.S. history, with billions collected, traded, and displayed. Yet, it's these few rare mistakes that truly capture the imagination, because they prove that even in the most controlled systems, imperfection finds a way to slip through. And when it does, it creates something completely unique. One dealer once said that finding one of these quarters is like catching lightning in a bottle. It's pure chance. But it happens. Someone somewhere opens a roll of quarters, expecting nothing, and finds a piece of history. That's part of the magic of collecting. You never know what's out there. You just keep looking. When the first Connecticut quarter error went up for public auction, the atmosphere was electric. Collectors from across the country logged in, watching the live bidding climb. 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. The room held its breath as the final bid flashed across the screen. Over $130,000. The coin, authenticated and slabbed in a pristine holder, was now one of the most valuable modern quarters in existence. Reporters called it the Connecticut miracle. But to those who understand coins, it was more than luck. It was history repeating itself in the smallest, most tangible form. The beauty of this coin lies not only in its mistake but in its symbolism. The charter oak on the quarter represents resilience and legacy. A tree that survived storms, that became a legend of freedom and endurance. In a poetic twist, the error coins carry that same spirit. They survived the impossible odds of minting perfection, slipped past the inspection lines, and made their way into the hands of ordinary people. Each one, in its own way, a survivor.so. The next time you're sorting through your change, don't overlook the Connecticut quarter. Turn it over in your fingers. Notice the light, the texture, the weight. Because it's not impossible, just incredibly rare, that you could be holding one of these minting miracles. And if you are, you're not just holding 25 cents. You're holding a piece of American minting history worth more than $100,000. Most people don't look twice at a quarter. It's just 25 cents, the kind of coin you hand over for a parking meter or leave forgotten at the bottom of a bag. But sometimes, the smallest details turn that ordinary coin into something unbelievable. That's what happened with a single 2000 South Carolina state quarter, one of the strangest and most valuable mint errors ever discovered. A simple mistake at the U.S. Mint that transformed a common coin into a piece worth over $100,000. It started with a man who had been collecting the 50 state quarters series. Back in 2000, nearly everyone was excited about the new designs. The way each state had its own unique symbol, something that made pocket change feel a little more interesting. He wasn't a serious collector, just someone who liked the idea of owning one of each. He kept his quarters in a binder with small transparent sleeves, neatly organized by state. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and then South Carolina. He had them all, or so he thought. One evening, while going through his collection, he noticed one of the South Carolina quarters looked strange. The shine was off. The coin felt heavier, thicker somehow. He thought maybe it was dirty or tarnished, but when he cleaned it gently, he realized it wasn't the surface at all. It was the metal. The color looked different, more golden than silver. For a moment, he wondered if it had been plated or altered, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was genuine. He held it under a magnifying glass and compared it to another South Carolina quarter. The edges were the same, but the luster, the tone, it didn't match. Then he noticed something even stranger. The strike seemed slightly off-center, the design not perfectly aligned. The word Carolina appeared slightly thicker, almost doubled. And then came the biggest surprise. On closer inspection, it looked like the coin had been struck on a different metal planchet altogether. Possibly one meant for a Sacagawea dollar. At first, he laughed at the thought. A quarter struck on a dollar planchet? Impossible, he thought. But the more he compared the coin, the more it seemed to make sense. The color matched the golden tint of a dollar coin, and the weight felt closer to that as well. He decided to post pictures on a numismatic forum online, just to see what others might say. Within minutes, comments started flooding in. Some thought it was fake. Others said it looked like one of the rare transitional mint errors from the year 2000. And then someone commented, "If that's authentic, you're holding a coin worth tens of thousands." He felt a chill run down his spine. The next day, he took it to a coin dealer in town. The shop owner, an older gentleman with years of experience, listened quietly as he explained. The dealer picked up the coin carefully, turned it under the light, and paused for a long time. Then he looked up and said, "This could be one of the big ones." He explained that around the year 2000, the U.S. Mint was transitioning between producing the new Sacagawea dollar coins and the state quarter series. Both coins were being struck at similar facilities, and in extremely rare cases, a few blank dollar planchets accidentally found their way into the quarter presses. When that happened, a quarter design was struck on the wrong metal, a golden dollar planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel one. Only a handful of such errors ever made it out into circulation. They were so rare that collectors would pay extraordinary amounts to own one that the man stood there stunned. "So, what's it worth?" he asked quietly. The dealer smiled and said, "If it's real and certified, anywhere from $50,000 to maybe $120,000, depending on condition. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime finds." The man could barely believe it. He'd held that coin in his binder for years. Thinking it was just another quarter, he sent the coin to be authenticated by a professional grading service. The wait felt endless. Each day, he wondered if it would turn out to be a fake or some kind of modern alteration. But when the report came back, his heart skipped a beat. The grading service confirmed it. It was genuine, a 2000 South Carolina state quarter struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet. The error was official, verified, and classified as one of the rarest state quarter mistakes ever recorded. Collectors started reaching out almost immediately. Word spread fast, especially among serious numismatists. This wasn't just another mint error. It was a golden anomaly, a piece of minting history. Auction houses began contacting him, eager to feature the coin in their next event. Eventually, he agreed to let it go to auction. He was curious to see how much it might fetch, and he wanted to share the story behind it. The auction took place in a packed room filled with collectors and investors. When the coin was finally displayed, you could feel the buzz ripple through the crowd. There it was, the golden quarter that wasn't supposed to exist. The auctioneer began the bidding cautiously at $20,000, and hands immediately went up. 30, 40, 50. The bids climbed fast, and the room grew tense. At 70,000, only two bidders remained, both determined not to let it slip away. Then the number crossed 80, 90, 100. The man sat in disbelief as the final bid came in at $120,000. The hammer fell, and the room erupted into applause. Afterward, interviews and articles appeared online. People were fascinated by the story, by how something so valuable could go unnoticed for years. Experts explained that these types of errors are incredibly rare because of how tightly controlled the minting process is. Modern coin production involves multiple layers of quality inspection, and blanks for different denominations are stored separately. But even with that, accidents can happen, especially during transitional years or when multiple coin types are produced in the same facility. The 2000 South Carolina quarter error became legendary among collectors. Photos of the coin were shared in coin magazines, YouTube videos, and collector forums. Some people even began going through rolls of state quarters from the bank, hoping lightning might strike twice. Others started weighing their coins, looking for that telltale difference in metal composition. For the man who found it, the experience was surreal. He'd spent years collecting casually, never expecting anything like this. The money changed his life? Sure, but more than that, it gave him a story to tell. A story about luck, patience, and the value of paying attention to small details. He often said that it wasn't just about the money. It was about realizing that treasures can hide in plain sight. Since then, a few other state quarter errors have surfaced, though none quite like the South Carolina one. Some were off-center strikes, others struck on foreign planchets or with partial designs. Each discovery reignited the excitement among collectors, proving that even in the most ordinary coins, there's always a chance for something extraordinary. But none matched the sheer uniqueness and beauty of that golden South Carolina quarter from 2000. Today, when collectors talk about modern mint errors, that coin still comes up. It represents a perfect storm of timing, production, and luck. The odds of a blank dollar planchet ending up under a quarter die were astronomically small, yet somehow it happened. And for that one person, it turned 25 cents into $120,000. If you look closely at your own coins, you'll see how much history they hold. Tiny details most people never notice. Edges, strikes, faint doubling. Each one tells a story about how that coin came to be. And maybe that's why people still search, still hope. Because in every handful of change, there's a possibility, however small, that one of those coins isn't like the others. That one of them holds a mistake. A beautiful, valuable mistake that slipped past machines and inspectors, waiting years to be discovered. The story of the 2000 South Carolina state quarter error isn't just about rarity. It's about curiosity, about what happens when someone takes the time to look closer. Most people would have never noticed it, but he did, and that made all the difference. The lesson is simple. Never assume something ordinary has no worth, because somewhere out there, another coin just like that might still be sitting in someone's change jar waiting to be found. And when it is, it'll remind us all again that even the smallest details can hold the biggest surprises. You've probably seen the New York State quarter hundreds of times before. It's one of the most recognizable coins in the entire state quarter series. Lady Liberty stands tall, her torch raised high, and behind her, the outline of New York with a line tracing the Hudson River. It's a beautiful design, released in 2001 to celebrate the state's history as the gateway to freedom. But what if I told you that some of these quarters, coins that look perfectly ordinary at first glance, are actually worth tens of thousands of dollars? Not because they're made of gold or silver, but because of one tiny, almost invisible mistake. When the U.S. Mint released the New York quarter, billions of coins were struck. Each mint was producing them at incredible speed. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco working day and night to meet the demand. But every once in a while, in the chaos of that precision, something goes wrong. A single blank coin, known as a planchet, might slip through the wrong press. A die might shift just slightly between strikes. And that's when magic happens, because that small mechanical mistake can turn a 25-cent piece into something worth more than a luxury car. Collectors today are constantly on the lookout for these 2001 New York State quarter errors. They're rare, but they're out there. And one in particular has become almost legendary, a coin struck on the wrong planchet or what's known as an off-metal strike. At first glance, it looks normal. But under the right light, you start to notice the difference. The color looks a bit off, the weight doesn't quite match, and the details appear just slightly distorted. It's subtle, so subtle that thousands of people have probably handled one and never noticed that. So what makes it special? The story begins at the mint itself. When the presses are running, hundreds of thousands of blank discs are fed into massive machines, each one intended for a specific denomination. Quarters are supposed to be struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets. But sometimes, by pure accident, a blank intended for another coin, maybe a foreign denomination, maybe even a nickel or dime, gets mixed into the wrong batch. When that happens, the dies strike the wrong metal, and the result is an off-metal error coin. These coins are one in millions, and every single one tells a story about a moment when the precision of the mint faltered for just a second. For the 2001 New York quarter, that's exactly what happened. A few coins were struck on experimental or foreign planchets that didn't belong to the batch. They passed through quality control undetected and ended up in circulation. Some even showed additional doubling in the lettering, most noticeably around the word Liberty and the date. Imagine holding one of those in your hand. It looks just like any other quarter, but a trained eye would see the difference immediately. And once it's verified, the value jumps dramatically. How dramatically? Try anywhere from $45,000 to over $112,000, depending on the grade and rarity. The first time one of these coins was discovered, it caused a quiet storm in the numismatic community. A collector in the Midwest had been sorting through rolls of state quarters, hunting for minor die varieties, when something about one coin's color caught his attention. It had a faint golden hue, and when he dropped it on a table, the sound was different, lighter, higher pitched. That's what made him take a closer look. Under magnification, he realized the surface wasn't right. It didn't have the same luster or texture as a standard quarter. And when he weighed it, the scale confirmed his suspicion. It was lighter than it should have been. That's when he knew he was looking at a mint error. He sent it off to be certified. And when the grading service confirmed it was a genuine 2001 New York quarter struck on the wrong planchet, the news spread fast. Collectors were fascinated. Some of them had been checking rolls of state quarters for years and had never seen anything like it. It wasn't just a misaligned strike or a simple doubling. It was a complete off-metal strike, something that rarely happens in modern minting. And when that coin went up for auction, the bids started climbing fast. By the end of the night, it had sold for well over $70,000. What makes errors like this so captivating is that they're real accidents, tiny flaws that sneak past the strictest systems of control. Every coin is supposed to be perfect, but perfection on a massive scale is nearly impossible. Even with lasers, sensors, and inspections, one or two errors out of billions still manage to escape. And when they do, they become something entirely different. They're not just currency anymore, they're history frozen in metal. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your New York quarter is one of these rare ones? Well, start with the basics. First, look at the color. A normal New York State quarter has a silvery gray tone, typical of its copper-nickel composition. But an off-metal strike may appear lighter or darker, depending on what planchet it was struck on. Next, check the details. Are any of the letters doubled? Does the edge look thicker or thinner than normal? Is the strike slightly off-center? These are the small signs that can indicate a mint error. And finally, the weight test. If you have a precision scale, weigh it. A standard quarter should weigh about 5.67 grams. Anything significantly lighter or heavier might be worth a second look. Of course, not every strange-looking coin is valuable. Some are just damaged, worn, or corroded. But that's what makes real mint errors so thrilling. They're genuine, rare, and verifiable. When you find one, you're holding a piece of American minting history that slipped through by accident, a 1 in a billion survivor of the most advanced coin-making process in the world. The most valuable New York error coins today have been authenticated by major grading services like PCGS and NGC. Their records show confirmed sales reaching into six figures. One particularly fine example sold for an astonishing $112,500. It was pristine with a sharp strike and perfectly preserved surfaces. Another, slightly lower in grade but equally rare, fetched around $45,000. That's the kind of range these coins command, depending on their condition and the exact nature of the error. Think about that for a moment. A simple quarter, designed for everyday use, worth as much as a high-end sports car. That's the beauty of numismatics, value born not from rarity of metal, but from rarity of circumstance. It's a reminder that even in a world of machines, perfection isn't absolute. There's always a chance for something unexpected, something remarkable to appear. When collectors talk about the State Quarter series, the 2001 New York coin often comes up as one of the most intriguing. Not just because of its design, but because of what it represents. The state itself has always been a symbol of opportunity, a place where fortunes are made, where luck and timing matter. In a strange way, the story of these rare error coins fits perfectly with that spirit. It's about chance. It's about being in the right place at the right time. And it's about noticing the details others miss. Every day, people handle quarters without thinking twice. They pass through cash registers, parking meters, and coffee shop counters, unnoticed. But hidden among those billions are a few extraordinary survivors, coins that carry a secret story. Maybe one of those is sitting in a jar on a kitchen counter right now. Maybe it's in your pocket as you're listening to this. That's what makes the hunt so fascinating. Every coin has potential, every small detail could be a clue. The New York quarter's error legacy also reminds us of how the mint learns from its mistakes. Each error, once discovered, leads to tighter quality control and improved precision. But even with the best systems in place, perfection is never guaranteed. That's the paradox of coin collecting. The more perfect the process becomes, the more valuable the few remaining imperfections are. And as long as machines make coins, collectors will keep looking for the ones that aren't quite like the rest. So, the next time you see a 2001 New York State quarter, don't just glance and move on. Turn it over in your hand. Look closely at the surface, the rim, the shine. Ask yourself, does something look different? Because history has proven, time and time again, that the most extraordinary treasures often hide in plain sight. That's how a 25-cent coin becomes worth more than $100,000. All it takes is one mistake, one unnoticed variation, and one pair of eyes willing to see what others ignore.